Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Counterpoint podcast. I'll be your host today. My name is Maurice, and I'm joined by my colleague Tarun, who recently published a white paper on cellular technology transitions and the potential for SoC players, and SoC meaning system on chip, which we'll be looking into today and diving a bit further. Hey, Tarun, how's it going?
Hey Maurice, all good here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great as well. Thanks. I think this is a pretty exciting topic to get into, especially in terms of what SoC players can be doing and what the opportunities are. And also, I think we'll talk a little bit about, different types of smartphones and feature phones and how they fit into this. So, just to set the stage here, I think right now, in a lot of mature markets like the US, UK, China, South Korea, we're transitioning from 4G to 5G, right? And that's one transition that we'll look into. But the other one is also for emerging markets where operators are, rather than going from 4G to 5G, they're looking into how do we get people from 2G or 3G networks to 4G. And I think particularly in places like Brazil or India, that's a really hot topic for many operators and many handset providers right now.
Right.
Yeah. So for 4G smartphones, usually, they're under about $50 or so that have been really making inroads into these emerging markets. However, feature phones still have a pretty sizable chunk of the share of total smartphones that being sold. So naturally, this represents a big opportunity for operators and handset vendors to look into. So that's kind of the stage where we're at right now. And why don't we get into some of the questions I have for you? Sound good, Tarun?
Sure. Makes sense.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit more about why feature phones are actually still important. And, we talk a lot about the new iPhones or new Samsung phones, but a lot of the world actually still has feature phones. So what's driving this, or why is it so important still?
Right. So yeah, Maurice, good one. So actually, if you look at these days, normally when we engage into the connectivity side of discussions, we are communicating through our smartphones. We are looking at the app side of the things, but there is a big chunk of the market which is there and which is hardly addressed. We are talking about a potential size of 2 billion segment. Like for example, right now, if you talk about the installed base of feature phone users across the world, it is almost 2 billion, which makes it almost 26% of the entire world population. And if you add on top of it the people who are not connected, which do not have a phone, which do not have internet connectivity, or not even a smartphone, that's another 2.5 billion. So we are talking about a potential of like 4.5 billion population where this kind of segment still fits, right? And again, you are right, like most of it is coming from emerging markets like India, Brazil, a big chunk of markets in Africa, where the feature phones are still very relevant these days. And coming back to your question, like why feature phones are still relevant, there are a couple of reasons behind it. If you look at, for a lot of people who are, like, let's say below the poverty line, or the literacy rate is very very low, and even the content consumption, or even the where the content is not optimized for the small screen, feature phone still makes sense for a lot of people. And you will be surprised, like even there are markets in the world where the cost of charging a phone is even higher than the cost of the phone itself over 1 year or 2 year time period. The cost of the data in some of the markets, if you look at like the differential between the cheapest data rate in the world, which is in few cents per GB, and the costliest in the world, which is like $26 for a GB. So we are living in a world with this level of differentiation, like across different regions, across different countries. So there's still a big, I can say, like digital divide which needs to be covered, especially coming from the markets like India and Africa, which together contribute around almost like I'll say like 4 in 5 feature phone users. So that these are the countries, these are the regions where feature phones are still very, very relevant, because people still do not find it meaningful to upgrade to the smartphones, because of the form factor they have been very comfortable with. Even uh, their social status or even their earnings do not allow them to move to the smartphones. The literacy rate is there. There are other infrastructure challenges as well, like the electricity and no battery backup, things like these. And even the use cases, like the durability which these feature phones come up with. Maybe some of these entry level smartphones do not come up with these level of capabilities. So there are different factors which are being applied to some of these user base who are still sticking to the feature phones, and it's still a massive, like 2 billion in number is still a huge user base.
Yeah, and you're right. And thanks for giving us kind of more of a background on that. Especially in these markets, right? These feature phones make it more accessible for people to communicate with their family, to do business. It provides them, a digital means of transaction. Often also, the way that they pay for services. So it's a great way for a lot of people to have access to things that they previously haven't had, right? And that's one of the big things.
And the use case, Maurice, will be it is again varies by region to region. I'm sure, like the particularly in North America, I'm sure like you can give a couple of examples. The people who are still sticking to the feature phone maybe have a different requirement, like elderly population or someone who is looking for a ruggedized phones. But someone in Africa, uh, they have a different set of use cases when it comes to these set of devices.
Yeah, so why don't we talk a little bit about that more then? So, what kind of opportunities do you actually see for handset makers here, especially with like feature-rich phones or what we also call smart feature phones? Like, what can they do with these devices in order to give more access to people?
Yeah, I think if you look at the average upgrade rate in a smartphone is always like close to like 2.5 years across different regions. But when it comes to feature phones, it is almost like 3.5 years, which means uh, there is a less innovation happening in this segment which caters to 2 billion population. And if you look at like some of the development goals which big bodies like United Nations offer, like for example, uh, uh, the main agenda of them is to significantly increase access to information and communication technology.
Correct, for the sustainable development goals you're talking about.
Exactly, and that is very important to uplift these users from a basic connectivity so that they can start using the internet and get connected to the world in a more relevant way. Because while doing that, they will be not uplifting themselves, but it will be a full upliftment of the country involved. So, for example, if someone who is living in Nigeria or Kenya or Ghana, the more people start using internet, the better it will be for the entire community, and hence the need for these form factor of devices to be upgraded to smart devices. So if let's say someone does not want to upgrade from a feature phone to smartphone, let's see how within the same form factor they can access the internet. And that's why the role of the smart feature phones become even more important. And they not only just provide the data, that is again from the user perspective it will be very important, but again from the operator's point of view. So for example, if the lot of 2G subscribers are moving to the 4G, some of the operators in these countries can actually use this spectrum in a more efficient way, basically, and that will help them to gain a lot in terms of OPEX, in terms of their network transition, in terms of even the cost per gigabit. So it will be even better for a lot of these operators if these users start migrating from 2G to 4G. So that's the kind. And in one of our studies, like we have done, if users are upgrading from 2G to 4G smart feature phones, there is a cost benefit of almost $7 billion involved for operators over the next 3 years. So that's the kind of benefit we are looking at if operators go for this transition from 2G to 4G, or even through these devices, basically.
Right, and just going back, can you give any other examples of ways or opportunities that have arisen from people using feature-rich phones? I'm talking about, like, having access to a mobile banking app, or being able to pay for their electricity. Do you have anything in particular that stands out as ways that these opportunities are presenting right now?
Yeah, so if you look at, like, let's take an example of a region like Africa. So digital payments, right? So we are right now living in this COVID world where this if we look at the way the people are doing their transactions, it's getting more and more digital, because everyone is looking for a touchless based mechanism. So in that case, if we are making more and more apps for smartphones, we are losing on a big chunk of users who have only feature phones. So if we have something like a smart feature phones, people can always use, like, digital payments through their uh, smart feature phones. So this kind of, like, adoption has always been there in the markets like Africa. I think they were first ones to uh, adopt this kind of transition. So for example, M-Pesa has been quite popular in Africa, right? So these kind of apps can be built even for the feature phone users, and not just here in the digital landscape, but more in the entertainment as well. If you look at, even the content consumption can be done, the gaming can be another thing, and a lot of localized apps in the native languages can be developed, so that people can consume content which is more relevant to their business. So another example can be, like, let's say a lot of farmers are actually dependent on the weather conditions for their crops, right? So they need approximately a good, you can say, like, forecast of what is the weather going to be like when they are going to sow their crops or cut their crops. So that information can be accessed through the basic feature phone, because a lot of these uh, people are actually having access to only feature phones. So, and not only this, one step further, they can always have access to the rate of their yield, basically what they have been growing on their fields. And if they go to a particular, let's say, to sell their crops, what will be the ample rate they will be getting? So normally in a country like India, they go almost like, they travel to couple of miles, go there, bargain there, and then still do not get the optimum price for their yields, right? But if they have some a local app, right, they can always, like, look into these kind of things.
So that's a particular important when we look into why that transition from 2G and 3G makes sense for 4G enabled smart feature phones, because you have that network speeds really that are necessary for these types of features to really show improvement or show benefit for these consumers. And like you said too, right? It really helps out for the country and the GDP to be able to get a lot of the population onto more connected devices, especially for the SDGs. So now I actually want to pivot a little bit, since we talked a lot about 2G and 3G and 4G networks, and I want to talk about 5G now. So what do you think the role is for system on chip players like, for example, Unisoc, in the 5G transition, who generally are not in your Apple and Samsung devices of the world. They play in a different price band. So where do you think those players fit into this 5G transition?
So yeah, so I think there is a big opportunity, not only for Unisoc, but other players as well. And 5G is not about just consumer point of view, right? It will be more enterprise as well, and that is where we can see a good adoption, or even from Unisoc perspective, like let's say from narrowband IoT perspective, right? So for example, if you look at the Unisoc portfolio, they have been doing relatively good in the feature phone segment and in the low to mid tier devices. So for example, when we talk about just the 5G smartphones, the recent partnership with Hisense, so that is about the smartphones, right? When we look at from the other perspective, so for example, let's say a smart feature phone segment, so they have this SoC, which is like T117, they have been doing for the 4G feature phones, so they are covering that ground pretty fast as well, and they have been successful in getting the design win in couple of operators as well. So for example, in MEA, they have partnered with a carrier called Orange, launching a model with a OEM, ITEL, which is Orange Sansa XL, which is actually based on Unisoc platform. Other examples as well in the same region, like partnering with Vodafone as well, again based on the Unisoc platform. So these are the opportunities they can always look at, because traditionally Unisoc has been very very strong in the feature phone segment, more than 60% share, SoC share uh, in the feature phone. But the question here is like, what apart from smartphones or feature phones? So for example, I can see a big opportunity in this case can be cellular IoT, which is one of the fastest growing, right? And it will cover a wide variety of devices with the 4G, 3G, or 2G support. So what we are estimating in our research is, if we look at the combined cellular IoT share of baseband, it will be close to like 4.7 billion by 2024, and contributing to almost like 12% of the total baseband value. And this is the space we think that Unisoc can do well. They have launched their recent 8908A ultra low power platform, which can again go into a lot of devices. The obviously the initial starting point will be China, but they are covering a good ground in that aspect recently. So I think, like for example, if you look at another example in this space, Unisoc 8910 solution has been adopted by some of the leading module manufacturers. So here example I can give from the China mobile IoT platform. They have partnered with Fivocom, Neoway is another one. So I think their initial upstart has been quite good, and covering fast. So yeah, plenty of opportunities in that space, and other opportunities if I can look into, it can go into like smart wearables as well, where they can cover the ground. CPEs can be another interesting segment, where they can actually launch multiple solutions. I think they have already launched something with China Unicom as well, if I'm not wrong, with their solution V510. So yeah, they have been doing well in that scenario, and especially talking about Unisoc here, they have plenty of opportunities to grow in the space as well.
Yeah, so kind of just to summarize, I think what you're saying is SoC players have essentially an opportunity to foster good partnerships, either with carriers or other component or hardware players, to really um, get these get the 5G transition going into these other verticals, and leveraging their expertise that they have, and being able to just uh, use their knowledge of their 4G um, products, and then also now driving down the cost for 5G for modules to get into these verticals.
And Maurice, you can relate even better, like another example apart from Unisoc is one of the leading player, Qualcomm, in this space. For example, you can relate even better. Like they are like miles ahead again from the competition, and already offering an end-to-end portfolio which is ranging from SoC to modem to RFFE antenna supporting both the sub-6 and millimeter wave. So these players are actually doing really well in this space, and that is one of the reasons we believe that the 5G ramp up will be faster than what we have observed in any of the previous technologies. And you can add your view on that. I'm sure like you might have like a couple of points over there as well from what Qualcomm is doing. I think you have been following that very closely as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's like you said, the 5G ramp up should be a lot faster than that we see for 4G and other technologies. Especially like you said, the enterprise area for IoT will be a big driver for this, especially with end to end solutions. But actually, this brings up to us to my last question that we have for you today, and I just want to kind of understand what you see the current challenges are that we have with 5G deployments. Can you give a little bit of more background for us there?
Yeah, so I think like any other technologies, it comes with an opportunity and challenges as well. So after every decade, there is a technology transition. So I think the first and foremost challenge, what I can see in terms of 5G, is the deployment perspective. Like there are different number of regions who are at different cusp of their maturity in terms of 4G right now. So when I look at like markets like we have been discussing this part in emerging markets, the even the 4G penetration is still below 50% in a lot of these countries, right? And majority of these operators want to first leverage that, and then obviously look into ways to put their resources into 5G. So what that means is in some of the regions that deployment might be delayed. So let us assume, let us take an example of a country like India. So where we are from, we have not even seen like auctions as of now. In this case, we are still eyeing 2021, which is 1 year down the line for possibility of 5G here. And India is now the second largest market in the world, right? So these kind of deployment challenges will be there. I'm sure like after that, there will be a coverage challenges as well. Like for example, if you have to look into the real potential of 5G, deploying millimeter wave will be very crucial, and looking at that adoption, right? So which regions will lead that adoptions, that will also be can also be looked into. And I think again the developed regions like US, Japan will take the lead over there, China, but a lot of these emerging markets will have their deployment and coverage at their own pace. So that's the challenge number one, and obviously across different spectrum band. And the second one is the cost of particular building that network. So again, in some of the regions, bidding for these spectrum will be very high. It will be very expensive rollout, and we need to look at which are the carriers who are willing to go all out on these technologies, because I'm sure they will look into like the different scenarios in terms of like how much money will it take to increase the coverage versus the desired revenue, or they will stick to LT in some cases or so. But over a period of time, I'm sure there will be technologies which will reduce this risk, or bring some more confidence into operators to go all out on 5G, because like I said, it's not just about consumers, it will be about enterprises as well. So there will be different use cases, and that brings me to the challenge number three is what are the different use cases. And one thing we are not sure about what are the top 10 use cases, but one thing is very sure, like different regions will have a different priority of their use cases. So somewhere FWA is fixed wireless will be a big priority. In other cases, you can have something else which will be driving the 5G adoptions. So it again depends upon like different regions, the different use cases. So for example, a use case in India of 5G might be entirely different from a use case of 5G in US. So that's the challenge number three. And then again, we need to keep an eye on what's the kind of regulations, right? There will be a risk of security because we will be more connected. One thing is for sure. And the kind of technology adoption within our lives during 5G will be super fast, just like this technology. So for from an end user point of view, they need to be very aware about the security and how these devices will be connected and the impact in their daily lives. So that needs to be looked into as well. So I think these are the some of the challenges we can see. But the billion-dollar question will be whether the opportunities will surpass these challenges, which has always been the case in the technology transition.
Yeah, that's you bring up very good points about the challenges, and I think that at least especially now during this pandemic, also another challenge is just how are 5G deployments doing during the pandemic, right? And so just another thing to look into as well. But those are my questions I had for today. So thank you for your contributions. I'm really glad that you were able to join us. And for our listeners, if you haven't listened to our previous podcast, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Music, as well as we'll have this on our regular website, counterpointresearch.com. If you want to know more about what Tarun has written, the white paper will be on our website, and there will also be a link in the description for this podcast below. Thanks a lot, everyone, and until next time, take care.